Dear viewers and readers, today we have with us Neil Seeman. He's an associate professor in health systems policy at University of Toronto's Dalla Lana School of Public Health. Neil spends his time digging into, we can phrase it like this, what makes people tick. He explores the hidden forces, the brain chemistry, the systems that shape our actions. He examines the intense mix of drive and vulnerability in high achievers, looking at the role of brain chemistry. And he challenges standard public health approaches, asking why one size fits all approach often fails and arguing for solutions based on individual complexity. It's a compelling look at the fundamental mechanisms impacting our well being. Ultimately, what Neil offers his readers and listeners a compelling lens, one that helps us understand how to build better habits, navigate challenges, and design environments for well-being. Neil Seeman, thank you for being with us. It's a genuine pleasure to have this conversation.
Thank you, Seeman. I'm honored to be here. Thank you, and I look forward to the conversation. It's a very good synopsis of the things I try to do.
Thank you very much. And in the let's start with your book, the first one, The Accelerated Minds, explores the unique drivers of entrepreneurs. What personal observation or what personal experience or aha moment or eureka moment first led you to drive into this fascinating connection between entrepreneurial drive and mental health?
Thank you, Seeman. There were sort of two. The main word that I associate with entrepreneurship is failure. Most entrepreneurial ventures fail, about 90%. That's probably conservative. Uh, and what struck me in the world of entrepreneurship is even especially among the entrepreneurs who were tremendously commercially successful, I was seeing a lot of debilitating self-harm, high degrees of suicidality, high degrees of depression, anxiety, terrible conditions. And I was struck by that. And then after my father died in January 2021, my father was one of the greatest brain researchers in Canadian history. He discovered the dopamine D2 receptor in the brain, which is the receptor in the brain where dopamine attaches to. I started reading his manuscripts and I started thinking, okay, the same dysregulation that's happening in the brains of those who suffer from psychosis may be also affecting the brains of high-achieving entrepreneurs as well. And I started doing the research, meeting scientists around the world, and they helped validate my hypothesis.
Mm. Is that the reason that you have started your book with the crisis of entrepreneurship, the very first chapter, and then you decided to define dopamine, how dopamine works, and the dangers of dopamine. And in the very last chapter, before the epilogue, is remaking the entrepreneur's world. What do you mean by that? Like, how does it form in that? In a very brief synopsis for our readers and viewers, please.
Yeah, so the current entrepreneurial world is very fast. There's a lot of pre-entrepreneurial messaging that says you've got to exit quickly, you've got to succeed quickly, and I want to slow it down. And that historically is the way that entrepreneurship was viewed. We've started to accelerate that over the last 10 to 15 years. The internet and technology and the speed with which we expect entrepreneurial ventures to succeed has accelerated. And that speed has just gone too far. And I want to slow it down. I will also want to change the entrepreneurial messaging to young people in particular, who understand this, I think, more so than people my age, and slow things down to better appreciate that entrepreneurial ventures are slow builds. You're trying to build a solution to a new or old problem and build it over time.
Wow. As a college level teacher, teaching business and venture capital sometimes to the students, I sometimes suggest to them before previously meeting you and have this conversation. I suggest them sometimes Slow Productivity, a book by Cal Newport. Probably from now on, we will also suggest a synopsis and then the book of yours recommendation as a side read because it's really important to slow down sometimes whenever everything is going fast to have the reflection while we are onto the path of journey, having the reflection side by side that which direction we are going. Research points to entrepreneurs facing mental health challenges at notably higher rates that you also mentioned in the book. So beyond the statistics and all the figures and facts and all all the numbers, what does this tell us about the systems of environment or environment of the entrepreneurship and what can we learn from this about human resilience and vulnerability? That is one another topic that you talk very well.
Yeah, thank you, Shuman. It's a great question. It relates deeply to the concept of resilience, dopamine. So, um, the system, as I say, is not aligned with human psychology. Human psychology is one that is deeply reflective and prone to resilience. That's what we are as humans. We're a resilient type. But dopamine in the brain does not only attach to achievement, but it attaches to the expectation of achievement. That is what entrepreneurs and what I call fast money entrepreneurs increasingly chase. And like addiction, that expectation of achievement that we often experience at the very beginning when we first tell our colleagues about an entrepreneurial vision, that expectation of achievement is what dopamine attaches salience to. And we're always trying to chase that first high. And just like your addict, you can never resurrect that. And that's what makes resilience for a certain type of entrepreneur difficult.
Mm. And also in this connection, as we were talking about dopamine, you highlighted in the book that dopamine has a dual role for the entrepreneurs, powering success, but also linked to vulnerability. Could you explain the mechanics of how this single neurotransmitter or chemical messenger can drive both incredible progress and potential struggle in an entrepreneurial brain?
Yeah, thanks, Shivan. So, dopamine is like the rocket fuel, or the superhuman power that fuels the entrepreneurial brain, but it can get dysregulated. So, the way dopamine works is it is a brain chemical that attaches to one of five dopamine receptors in the brain. My dad is, as I mentioned, Philip Seeman. He discovered the D2
Yeah.
receptor, which is the receptor that dopamine attaches to. But it's not only the attachment that matters, it's the speed of release that matters. And so, for example, the highest speed of release is gambling. That's one of the highest speeds of release. Crack
Wow.
addiction is one of the highest speeds of release. And so, in the entrepreneurial brain, if it's not regulated, if it's dysregulated, if it goes faster, we need to slow it down. And this is why I recommend entrepreneurial messaging that slows down the system, that doesn't demand of entrepreneurials that fast, very unrealistic commercial success.
Mm. And oh, and also your work touches, and which was very fascinating for me while I was reading the two books. Your work touches on a philosophical shift also within the entrepreneurship, like from Stoicism to Epicureanism, and focused on like you touched on the reality that in almost in everyone's mind is that quick financial gain, have to have that. What does this change in the value system of the entrepreneurial world mean for the daily habits and inner well-being of individuals who are high performing in this field?
We beat ourselves up. And that's what entrepreneurs do, right? And you know, in the media, for example, we only hear about the spectacular successes and the spectacular failures, I should say, within
Yeah.
the world of entrepreneurship. We don't hear about the vast majority of entrepreneurs who are quiet entrepreneurs who are slowly building, for example, in the trades and a whole range of industries that are not technology, that are driving our prosperity. So historically, I say that entrepreneurs are kind of stoic. They're slow moving, and they still are. But we have pressures within the investor ecosystem to move so fast, to be Epicurean, to uh, enjoy the fast release, and that's impacted by an investor ecosystem that is demanding rapid responses. Now, it's not just the investor ecosystem, it's a whole range of pre-entrepreneurial messaging that happens on social media in particular. This is where I've seen the greatest degree of pressure, where young people, they tell me that it's very challenging because people only chest thump about their very quick successes. And this makes them feel terrible because oftentimes the stoic entrepreneur, the slow moving entrepreneur is someone who is an all or nothing thinker. And they're sort of driven down this rabbit hole of beating themselves up even further. And these are a number of forces that I think sort of move us away from that stoic sense of entrepreneurialism to Epicureanism, or what I often call just fast money entrepreneurship. An
Yeah.
emphasis on what's called the exit, what I call exiteers, people who focus from the very beginning when they put their market capitalization table together. You're familiar with the hockey stick curve and increasingly unrealistic expectations. We have so many founders today, everyone, and it's tremendously exciting, I should say, entrepreneurship, and we're very fortunate to be living in this world where new ideas are ubiquitous, but at the same time, we need to foster a healthy sense of entrepreneurship.
Yeah. And the way you presented the argument, maybe it is not only for the entrepreneurs, for the other line of professionals, the fintech, the HR, or the accountant, like other sectors of professionals who are on a kind of a corporate race or something. It is also true for them as well, isn't it?
Yes, I mean, it flows down throughout the entrepreneurial ecosystem, and you can be an entrepreneur within a large organization. I call those individuals intrapreneurs. So those people do
Fascinating.
exist outside of the traditional founder ecosystem. There is something different about founders, I should emphasize, however. And a founder can be a creative individual, someone who writes a book, someone who starts a magazine like yourself, and a podcast. Podcasters are very interesting entrepreneurs. The other people who need to be really sensitive to this are the partners of entrepreneurs. They're often the people who are closest to the entrepreneur. And of course, the investors and the board of advisors, the board of directors. These are all people who need to be made aware of the particular vulnerabilities of the types of people who are prone to dopamine dysregulation, which, as you say, can exist within a big corporation. One of the reasons big corporations need to be hypersensitive to it, and HR needs to be hypersensitive to it, is because it's very hard to retain these individuals if
Yeah.
they beat up on themselves too much. And they're often hyper productive individuals. And so they're going to leave quickly if they're not better understood.
Yeah, my main teaching track is HR and basically strategic HR. I'm learning a lot. I'm learning a lot from this conversation. And in my understanding, whenever I was reading the first book, that book that we're talking about, Accelerated Mind, you have shared a bit of your personal detail that your dad was this big thinker in that field, and your mother's contribution, field of contribution, was also very close to that, but both you and your siblings, you didn't get into the medical, you didn't get into the scientific research field. But later, whenever you started reading your father's papers, you thought that it's kind of a calling. It's kind of you should be the flag bearer of that too, and you should spearhead the ongoingness of knowledge. So, whatever you have written on Accelerated Mind, and later we will come to the second book, is it sometimes is it related to your personal experience and how you grow up, and just to shed a bit of light and how much you can share on that?
Thank you, Shuman. It's entirely aligned with my life. I mean, everything I do is in honor of my parents. I returned as faculty to the University of
Fantastic.
Toronto in
Fantastic.
honor of my parents and a wide range of entrepreneurial initiatives and social impact initiatives that I'm trying to be part of, to spread these messages and to advocate on behalf of individuals who are at risk of mental health maladies. And so there's definitely a connectivity to my parents. I was raised in a lab, basically, at the medical sciences building, not too far away from me, just a few hundred meters away from me, where I am right now. And so, according to my parents, my second word was in fact dopamine. And so I grew up in this field. This is how I learned. This is how I learned about mental health. And I learned about addictions in particular. So I've always been fascinated by it. My brothers and I, we're all entrepreneurs in our own way, and so I think that inherently it was a personal connection to my parents and the importance of, yes, continuing that message in their honor. After my mother died, she was a woman's health, mental health researcher focusing on
Oh,
estrogens in the brain,
wow.
and her work with my father was really important, to destigmatizing a mental health. A wide range of things that she did, in particular to bring attention to mental health. We forget that in the 1960s and 1970s, there were headlines in eminent media like the New York Times
Mhm.
that attributed the problems of kids with mental illness to the mothers. And they didn't acknowledge the fact that it was biological. And it took time. It took people like my parents and their colleagues around the world to spread this message that there was actually biochemistry in the brain
Mhm.
that was affecting this, and it wasn't the fault of the mothers. And so a lot of what inspired my parents and inspires me is to make sure that parents and families and caregivers of people who are suffering understand that it's not their fault.
Yeah. I face it sometimes um, I have only one son, and he's suffering from he's on an autism spectrum, so developmental delay and everything. So whenever I deal with him and whenever I deal with the therapist, the first thing they tell us is that, you know what, it is not a condition, or it is not a failure, or it is not a lacking. It is who they are. They're specially abled, and you should be more careful about nurturing your child because he's different. And the way I understood by working closely with my son is that everybody wants a genius child, but nobody wants to be a genius parent.
I don't know if I've ever met a genius parent.
Yeah, so,
Yeah.
so I the way you described yourself, your background in the book, you were pretty lucky that you were growing up in a certain environment that was your parents were actively involved, scientifically destigmatizing all these. So it's a
Yeah,
privilege.
yeah, it is. And every day I sort of measure my success in the day as to whether or not I sort of have advanced some of the messages and knowledge of my parents. And it's interesting. After I wrote this book and publish this book, the
Mm.
response was very interesting. I thought my major audience was going to be business owners and that people maybe in their 40s and 50s. And yet there were three groups, maybe four, that reached out to me the most. Um, and I only realized later why. So one was new immigrants to Canada and North America. Another were women entrepreneurs.
Wow.
Those two groups I felt are bullied the most and in entrepreneurship and I realized okay that does make sense. Then the other group, the third group, were the sort of the caregivers or the partners of
Yeah.
entrepreneurs because we often forget that an entrepreneur is not one person, it's a family unit.
Mm.
And then the fourth group were young people, teenagers. So it's really interesting. My theory
Ooh.
there is that young people really aspire and look up to entrepreneurs, but they're also much more conversant and familiar and destigmatized
Mm.
to mental health conditions.
Mm.
So, and giving talks in front of high schools and speaking with teenagers, I found that incredibly rewarding and it inspires me about the next generation of entrepreneurs.
Yeah, and it's interesting because your book, Accelerated Mind, it's not a very the way the readers are reaching you. I think the first edition came out in 2023, right? It's a very post-COVID phenomena.
Yeah, post-COVID phenomenon, right as entrepreneurialism was really torquing and accelerating across the
Yeah.
world. People, and there's a large range of theories about why that is. And, COVID accelerated entrepreneurship, new
Yes.
innovations accelerated entrepreneurship. People wanted to be unshackled from traditional
Mm.
work environments, a
Yes.
remote workforce. Um, and then shortly, my book is actually in a few weeks going to be released in Japan. I'm very excited about that by
Wow,
a new
congratulations.
publisher, Toyo Keizai, which is a very prominent business and economics publisher. So it's reached around the world, and I'm glad about that. Um, and so yes, it's had a sustainability factor and a really interesting impact. I've given talks to stock exchanges, banks, and I have had a lot of great receptivity to this message. And
Mm.
I'm part of a larger group of people who have been spreading this message across the world.
Mm. And by the way, just a footnote, I have given your book, the first one, The Accelerated Mind. That's I started reading, and I gave it to my son's therapist, who's working with my son since last 9 years. She loved it.
Oh, well, thank you. That's
I
great
loved it, and
feedback. Yeah.
she works with the Geneva Convention, so she's very very excited. I say that okay, I'll tell the good words to the
Yes,
author,
thank you.
but
Thank
you
you
have
for
to
that.
read the second one as well. Double Excel, you have to read that as well. She said she will do it. Okay, so as we are searching it, and this one was published from Sutherland, but the book that we are now talking about is um, is your second book. It is the Triple XL Obesity and the Limits of Shame, and it was published from. I was really fascinated to University of Toronto Press Incorporated, 2011. That's a huge thing. So connecting your work with the entrepreneurial mind. So it was a previous publication, and how your focus shift. So you grew up in a very medical environment. So how does your focus went to obesity in double XL? And do you see any common behavioral pattern or impulse dynamics that link the drive in the entrepreneurship to the challenges many people face with the food and weight?
Yes, absolutely. The same impulse control affects those who suffer from obesity for a wide range of complex challenges.
Okay.
Obesity is what's often referred to as a wicked problem, a systemic societal problem. It's not
Mm,
an individual problem. It can trace itself to cultural phenomenon, socioeconomic phenomenon, family phenomenon.
yeah.
So we can't simplify it. So the same emotional dysregulation that applies to entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs, just like those who are prone to obesity, tend to be all or nothing thinkers. So again, entrepreneurs, success or failure, bullying themselves, beating themselves up, those who are sort of driven to overeating similar. They pursue diets, and we all know diets don't succeed 90% of the time, if that. And again, all or nothing thinking, prone to narratives that are very self defeating.
Yeah. No, that's definitely true. And in the book, and Double XL, you challenged the effectiveness of traditional, often shame-based. That is basically the first chapter, or one of the first chapter of introduction of your book, that the genesis of shame. It's often shame-based public health campaigns around obesity. And why do these one-size-fits-all, again, message often fail to challenge individual behavior? And what does that teach us about how people should actually adopt or develop new health habits?
Yeah, the last thing those who are obese need to hear is that obesity is a bad thing. They know that. They're overwhelmed with messages increasingly today on social media, multimedia platforms that keep barking at them about the facts of obesity and all the medical and chronic care challenges that are associated with that. So they already impose self-shame, and they don't need these top-down messages as opposed to more tailored messages that are sensitive to their own individual concerns. The reception to that book was very interesting. It came out
Oh,
at a time where childhood obesity was very much on the public agenda, thanks to
yeah.
the First Lady Michelle Obama. So it got a lot of attention in America. And it was interesting because it was embraced by people in science, people who have studied obesity for a long time. But it was rejected and mocked by libertarian economists who misunderstood the message of the book, I feel, and felt that I was advocating for a whole range of subsidies, not entirely accurate. And again, it was interesting because what we were really doing, and my co-author is a prominent Canadian economist who was looking at the economic drivers of obesity, which are complex. And so we needed to understand how can we create personal, tailored messages. And I should say, since that book came out, it's actually pretty hard. I mean, the public health community has, and I don't want to suggest we were singly responsible for that, but the public health community has recognized that these top-down, shame-based messages, which were more pronounced in America
Mm,
than they were in
yeah,
Canada. There were some
yeah.
very hard-hitting campaigns on the subways in New York, which exposed the buttocks of people who were obese and ridiculed people who were obese, and they were terrible. And so that's actually changed pretty substantially. So we have seen progress on that front as well.
Yeah. So considering these two books that you have written and your work at the University of Toronto, um, how the intellectual osmosis happens, like the your personal reading of your father's manuscripts, journals, your mother's work, the growing up in a scientific community. So that's your personal intellectual bank account. And whenever you are working in Toronto, University of Toronto Public Health, the Dalalana Public Health, so these teaching comes from another academic rigor and everything. So how do you think this intellectual osmosis happens, and how much your personal study, personal curiosity enriches your teaching and your work at the public health department, and teaching in that department and interacting with those bright minds helped doing your personal endeavors of writing these two books and other endeavors that you are going to do?
Yeah, thank you, Shuman. I mean, what it's done is it's made me realize increasingly that we need to pay attention to the individual when the individual habits when we're designing systems. So we have to look at how individuals are actually acting. We can't sort of design a system on a chalkboard. We can't take a system that may work in one country and plop it into another country or a different culture. So, for example, in elder care and the social isolation of people who are older with an aging population, this is something I'm increasingly sensitive to. When you look at their behavior, these are not people who are using apps. We have to look at how they actually behave. They're oftentimes isolated in their own apartments and alone without partners. So they've done interesting experiments, for example, in France, where they have postal workers actually engage with these isolated individuals. In Canada, locally, we've had naturally occurring retirement communities where social workers interact with everyone in the building because we go where individuals are. And so this has been seen in a number of different public health contexts where we need to match and evaluate individual behavior as opposed to just sort of directing a system. And I should say I'm not alone in messaging this, but it's certainly something that I've realized about a wide range of complex problems that society faces.
Wow. Yeah. Yes, and definitely. So, looking ahead, given the pressures on entrepreneurs and the complexity of public health issues like obesity, on the context of the two books, what gives you a sense of hope for the future? Meaning, are there any signs that the systems or entrepreneurial and public health are starting to evolve to better support the individual well-being?
Yes, definitely. Well, within the public health academy and public health practitioners, we see this in different fields like addiction, for example, a destigmatization of addictions, understanding how people with addictions are actually dealing with it. So not imposing one size fits all solutions within the entrepreneurial community. Again, young people, founders around the world. We've had the Founders Mental Health Pledge, which is spread to about 40,000 institutions in at least 40 countries around the world, where companies, venture
So, looking ahead and given the pressures on entrepreneurs and the complexity of public health issues like obesity, what gives you a sense of hope for the future? Are there signs that the systems, entrepreneurial or public health, are starting to evolve to better support individual well-being?
Yes, absolutely, Shuman. I mean, within the public health community, both public health practitioners, those who study public health, there's been a wide range of initiatives and programs that have recognized that we need to evaluate individual behavior. We need to step inside individuals' shoes before we advance a system-wide policy.
Mm.
This has been most pronounced recently in the field of addictions, where I've seen a great deal of attention being paid to those who suffer from addictions to understand the individual and complex reasons why they're prone to addiction before policies are imposed at a system level. Secondly, within the field of entrepreneurship, there's been a great deal of change in the last few years. We've had the Founders Mental Health Pledge, which is spread around the world, more than 40 countries, tens of thousands of companies have committed not government funds, but their own individual funds at the beginning to make sure that both individual entrepreneurs and early employees have access to these toolkits and resources when they feel dysregulated, when they feel disconnected. There have been a wide range of discussions. This narrative is changing. Young people are increasingly aware of mental health challenges that are attached to entrepreneurship. So I see very exciting, positive developments in the near term.
No, that's a very good news for everyone of all of us. And finally, we are to the last talking point. So finally, for the listeners and the readers who might identify with having an accelerated mind, to coin the phrase straightly from your book title, or who are navigating personal health journeys, recovery journeys, or makeshift journeys like getting out of obesity, what is one practical idea or perspective, perhaps related to building better habits or understanding themselves, that you would encourage them to explore?
So what I recommend is what I call radical self-compassion. When I started talking about this, I would learn about all these hacks like meditation, journaling. These are all important pieces of the puzzle. But at the end of the day, they're all about being dispassionate and objective about the conditions that you have and the narratives, the self-defeating narratives that you have. And so the practical suggestion I have is to put yourself in the position of someone who's advising a close friend, a family member who's going through this condition. What kind of advice would you give them if they're going through that? What you need is to step away. The second piece of advice I've had that I think is tremendously valuable is just to laugh a lot, like laugh 15 minutes a day. It is genuinely funny to be juggling a lot of activities as an entrepreneur, and you have to step away. It's all about distance, not being caught up in yourself. And so anything that can help you be distant and make your challenges be objective is helpful in that regard. Radical self-compassion.
With that beautiful, beautiful takeaway, we have come to the end of this conversation. Neil Seeman, it was an absolute pleasure having your insights for us, for me, and for our readers and viewers. Thank you so very much for giving us your precious time.
Oh, thank you, Shuman. Thank you to your magazine and to your own entrepreneurial endeavors. Congratulations. And I also like to say thank you to all those who support entrepreneurs, family members, and those who are affected by entrepreneurs. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.